Today you're going to look at 10-mark question. It's one that a lot of you find hard. It's the hardest question on this paper, but you can really easily get half marks without too much trouble. Keywords that you need for this question. If you need to, you can pause the video and come back to this as we go through. Nature, origin, purpose, you've used consistently since year 7. Context is information that you know from around the time of the source that is relevant. There's no point throwing in anything about the Cold War. You have to know what the question's asking you. So some tips. Don't write that a source is quite useful. It sounds weak. Say it is useful or it's not useful. And you don't have to say the words from, not. So, for example, the nature of this source is, you could just say, I don't trust this source because it's a cartoon. You talked about the nature, but you don't have to say the word nature, origin and purpose. Do back up what you pick out from the source with your own knowledge. Do that as much as you can. Do mention what you think the source has not shown you. If you think it's missed out a really big event or a big piece of information, point that out. And do feel free to say both sources are not useful or why they're both useful. Okay, as long as you say why they're useful or not useful, that is fine. So the keywords of the question. The question will always be how useful are, and then it will change what sources it tells you to look at. So your keywords are useful, the effect that the creation of NATO had on Europe in this particular example, and your own knowledge are the big bits to pick out. Always read the question, because that first little bit will be different. It'll be examining the could be relationship between Stalin, Truman, it could be anything. So always read it. 2 sources that we've got. One that you've seen before, famous one after the creation of NATO. You guys know how Stalin reacts. He creates the Warsaw Pact. And one from Stalin commenting on it. If you like your time, take your time on those 2 sources. Again, just pause them and have a look. So the 2 ways you look at a source are this. Okay, you make a judgment on the information you get from the source, so the content, and you make a judgment based on the NOP of the source. What that looks like in a paragraph. The writing frame for each paragraph is roughly this. Source B is useful because it tells us that. From my own knowledge, I know this is true because, and again, keep it relevant. However, it cannot tell us what's the source missing out. And then lastly, NOP. To try and talk about why it's useful or not. You don't have to be negative all the time. A lot of you think that you have to always say a source is not useful because. You can say it's really useful because it's written by this person. Don't feel you can't be positive. If you like time to read through this, that's an example paragraph. Just one paragraph. Okay, so you do the exact same for the other source. But if you want to, take your time, pause it, have a good look. You can say anything you want to in terms of judgment, as long as you're backing yourself up. So towards the end, secondly, as a cartoonist, I do not believe he is in the best place to judge what kind of impact NATO had. So this candidate has talked about the origin of the source, cartoonist, and said whether or not they think that's useful or not. You could say he is useful because he's a political cartoonist and he will research his material before he actually creates a cartoon. Either one would be fine. So to recap, put it in context. Anything you use has to be relevant. If you look at that paragraph on the last slide, you'll notice that there's an awful lot of information in there, but it's all relevant. It's all related to NATO. And lastly, always make a judgment. Is it useless? Is it useful? And explain why you think it's one of those 2.